All right, here we go. Take two. Now we're going to go into comedy. The last system that I used did not work so well, so now we're going to try it with Zoom recording. Great. So most of y'all are probably familiar with comedy. The whole purpose of comedy is to provoke amusement and laughter, right? It's just to be funny. We're not trying to necessarily prove a point, although it can be used for that. But it's just to make us happy. Laughter is quintessentially human. Other animals and creatures can feel happiness and sadness and different emotions, but we're the only ones that can laugh. And that's why we've created comedy, to make ourselves do that, make ourselves feel good, right? So there are a few characteristics of comedy. There are several different types of comedy, which we're going to go over in a little bit. But first, we're going to kind of talk about the ground rules. So a lot of times in comedy, there is a suspension of natural laws. So what that means is that people do not, and actions do not have the same consequences as they would in real life, right? So crazy things can happen, whether that means something physical like gravity doesn't work, or it just means that people don't have to pay for their actions. Weird things can happen in comedy, right? The whole point, again, is to make us laugh. So strange stuff goes on. There's also a contrast between individuals and social order. So what that means is either you're going to have a normal character in an abnormal world. So if you think about SNL, we're going to talk a lot about SNL in this because it's funny. There's different types, genres of comedy within SNL skits. So you'll either have a normal person in one of those skits in a really weird world, right? Whether they're put in space or they're put in a different country, or just in a world that doesn't suit them. And then that can make funny situations arise because of lack of communication or different things. Just the world being bizarre might be funny. Or we might put an abnormal character into a normal world. So it might be that the character is weird or strange and silly, right? And everyone else around them is in a normal situation. So if you think about, let's see, characters, people even just like Steve Urkel, right? He's strange, he's nerdy, he's silly, he's funny. So the rest of the world around him is normal, but he's abnormal because of the way he dresses, the way he talks, the way he acts, the way he pulls up his pants really, really high and, sticks his hips out and forward, and just his posture. Everything about him is a little bit strange and exaggerated, and that's why it's funny. So every comedic play has to have a comic premise. So what is the comic premise? It's an idea or concept that turns the accepted notion of things upside down. For example, Lysistrata, I've got a YouTube video if you'd like to watch it. It is a Greek play about an island of people. The men all were going off to war and had been at war for years and years and years. And the women were sick of it. Their sons were dying. Their husbands were dying. Life was just awful for these women because they felt like they couldn't keep anything, right? Everybody around them, everyone that they loved was dying. And so they decided to take over by withholding sex. So they essentially told their husbands, you ain't getting any. And they were able to take over the government, the Congress, the leaders, everything, because the men were then rendered powerless because they could not control themselves anymore. And they really, really wanted some from their wives. So this whole premise, turns the accepted notion of things upside down, right? The women were able to gain control in the government, which was not the norm for Greek society. They also became the ones that held the power in their families. The family dynamics swapped instead of the men being the one holding power. So that's an example of one premise, but there are lots of them out there. All comedies have a premise of some sort. Now, like I said, there are multiple different kinds of comedy, forms of comedy. Two very popular ones are farce and satire. So it's easy to get those two mixed up. We are going to talk about both of them. I'm just going to click play to kind of get this loaded and started. So farce is all about exaggeration. It's about broad physical humor, plot complication. So what does that mean? Broad physical humor, again, like Steve Urkel. Okay, there we go. Nope. Here we go. Is it paused? I don't know. So here we go. All right. So farce, where were we? Broad physical humor, again, like Steve Urkel, the way that he physicalizes his humor, right? It's very much, he does it with his body. That could also mean things like slapstick, right? You know, the Three Stooges, the way that they all like slap each other and they try to jab each other's eyes and have all these movements. So slapstick is an example of broad physical humor. There are also in farce lots of crazy plot complications. There may be mistaken identities, or you know, like chasing each other and going through the wrong doors. There's also stereotyped characters. Basically, farce, the only reason for it is for entertainment and laughter. It's just being silly is all farce is. Again, just ridiculous situations and some horseplay. Things don't have to have a rhyme or reason. They're just to be funny. So YouTube or Monty Python is an example of farce. This is Monty Python and the Holy Grail.